Hey parents, it's Laura. I just wanted to give you all a quick rundown of the Bible stories we'll be going over this summer with your kids in Sunday school. And I want to start by saying that I think it's really easy for us in children's ministry to recycle a lot of the same Bible stories with kids because we have, a group of Bible stories that are appropriate for children. And then we kind of sift through that and find the ones that really appeal to kids and are kind of like easy to do with kids. And then we kind of do those over and over again. So this summer, I wanted to back away from that and really strongly focus on stories that kids and maybe even adults haven't really heard or aren't super familiar with. So this summer we'll be going through the book of Acts, and it's a narrative of the early church and a lot of the kind of really crazy things that they did and that happened to them. So we'll be focusing on some of the narrative high points of the book of Acts, and within that, some lesser known stories and characters. So, for example, we'll be talking about someone who's commonly called Simon the Magician or Simon Magus in Acts 8. I'll be calling him Simon the New Christian because that's who he really is. So I'm trying to look at some of the stories from a different angle than we typically read them. I'll also be focusing on someone I'm calling the Queen's Treasurer. We usually call him the Ethiopian eunuch. And, for obvious reasons, I won't get into what a eunuch is in the Sunday school lesson, but we'll talk about some of the social implications of his station in life in that Bible story at a kid's level. Super fun. So we'll also be talking about the story of Tabitha. We'll be talking about Rhoda, the servant girl, and Mary, some different things like that. We'll be talking about the church council meeting in Jerusalem, and some other figures that we don't usually talk about outside of Peter and Paul. So we will be doing a couple stories with Peter and Paul, but we're trying to bring in the whole story of God's people in Acts. Because if we just focus on a couple of those big figures, those big names, we're not really getting the whole story. So that's what I want to do this summer with our Sunday school kids. And I also just want to tag onto that, a question of what is your spiritual discipline right now? So I come from some, Christian traditions where we were encouraged to read the Bible for a significant amount of time every day. Now, and I, as a parent, I know that is not possible. and that sometimes we end up putting a lot of guilt on ourselves when we were not doing a spiritual practice that we feel we should be doing. So I just give that as an example to say to you, what have you found life-giving? And if you find something, some kind of spiritual practice burdensome, how can you change it? How can you transform it into something that's life-giving rather than something that is sort of guilt-inducing when you don't get to it? And I would encourage you to find some kind of spiritual practice where you can take some time and recenter. So that might, it might involve materials that the church is producing and putting online for you, like watching the service or coming onto the daily prayer call or things like that. It might also just be something that you do by yourself alone. So I find that my most life-giving spiritual practice, and I'm not perfect with, keeping up with it or anything like that, but I try to do it regularly. And when I do, I find that it's really beneficial to me, is just sitting with a very short portion of the text. So I'll read a part of the Bible that is just maybe a few verses long, maybe a paragraph or two. And I really just sit with that. And sometimes I'll write out my thoughts about that, and I'll pray. I'll have a conversation about that with God. And it doesn't usually end with me being like, I'm totally better now. It doesn't end like that. It's just kind of, it's soul work. And so obviously you probably have a lot of other things that you might do or you've heard of as ideas for spiritual practice. So I'd encourage you to just continue moving forward with that and finding, what does God give you life through? What is a practice that you have in the week or during the day that it helps you rest and center? Because as parents, time is such a premium, and we could just have, if we can just have 5 minutes to ourselves to kind of breathe and recenter, I feel like we can do anything. We just need a little bit of time sometimes. Ideally, we'd have more time than that, but I think we all know the truth is that we don't really have more than 5 minutes sometimes. So I want to leave you with that, and I would love to hear from you guys. If you have anything that you want to share, thoughts, prayer concerns, anything like that, let me know. I miss you all so much. Miss your kids. Miss being with you guys on Sunday mornings. So bye.